And that's terrific for a guy who has a few other things to think about. And your willingness to come here and talk to people is great. But you know, I was thinking when Hubert Lacroix was talking about democracy and culture, you're really a subject for the CBC's new strategic plan. You're at that intersection of democracy and culture in a way that probably nobody else is. You're dealing with Supreme Court decisions, the Prime Minister's office, the cabinet, the whole economics of, well, the whole Canadian economics. You're dealing with a huge number of contentious issues. I can't think of a regulator that has had as much controversy and difficult decisions on his shoulders as you are, but I kind of get the impression that you like it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I love coming here because it's one of the few national events we still have. The whole industry is there. Now that we no longer have a Canadian Association of Broadcasting, this is clearly the main event in this domain, and you learn an awful lot. Like yesterday's opening session, I thought was dynamite, and then Tapscott, I loved what he had to say, etc. It gives you perspective. As to your question, I mean, the way it's set up right now, we have Parliament, which basically makes framework legislation, like the Broadcasting Act or the Telecom Act, and then you appoint a regulator to deal with the nitty-gritty, fill it out, etc. And everything is controversial, and it's always a question of costs, of money, of protecting Canadians, protecting producers, but also giving Canadians what they want, and everything is controversial. And we are there to take the heat for the politicians. That's how the system is set up. You give the broad framework, who can be against having a Canadian system that reflects Canada? Well, what does that mean? How do you make it work? That's left to us. And if we get to, and there's checks and balances. As you know, they can give us instructions up front, or if they don't like what we do, they can review us, etc. So I think the system is, well, anybody who's a regulator and who's like me, the chairman and therefore so the spokesperson, has to be prepared to take an awful lot of heat. Do I enjoy it? No doubt. I think it's not the controversy. I know I enjoy the subject matter. I enjoy the challenge, being it's the core of an industry that's undergoing tremendous change. It's fascinating. Nobody knows where it goes, and yet we all know this is so essential to our economy. It's a driver of the future.
Well, that's great, and maybe this audience can generate a little more heat for you since you like it so much. And you'll have an opportunity to do that at the license renewals, which are coming up in April for the private stations and fall for the CBC. You've issued a framework. Are you going to stick to it, or are there going to be a lot of changes?
No, I think what you know what we did. We said the division between over-the-air and specialty makes no sense, especially now in this day and age where most of the specialties are owned by OTAs, who then owned by cable or satellite companies. So let's treat them as a group. And let's make sure they have maximum flexibility. They can shift in between, etc., subject to certain reserves. But having specialty channels at one time and over the air at another just makes no sense. So we said, here's a framework. We will treat you as a group. You got to have 30% of your gross revenue on Canadian programming, and you can shift it within certain limits between broadcast specialty and over the air. And of course, the 30% is sort of the aspirational norm. We'll have to look at each case for how it's different. I expect this to be actually a very interesting discussion, because we also introduced this whole new concept of programs of national interest, which is documentary, drama, and award show, to make sure that this is really spent properly. It does reflect Canada, and it's untried. We'll see how it works. It certainly will give a boost in the arm to documentaries, which are right now, and drama. But the detail, as always, the devil's in the detail. We'll see what happens at the hearing.
Right, but you did put out this framework. Yeah. A lot of the interventions that I've read are asking you are sort of starting the discussion all over again, and I'm just wondering if the framework really is going to, is solid and...
The hearing is there to fill out the framework. Not to redesign the frame.
Okay, not to redesign the framework. One of the things that I've noticed in a lot of the applications in changes of conditions of license that have been requested is the request for broadcasters to do in-house production. Now, I know the Act talks about independent producers. What's your feeling about in-house production?
Well, obviously, there's a good argument for in-house production, but there's also a good argument for independent. We're, after all, dealing with the creative industry. And if you have independent producers, I think the chance of being creative and innovative is far greater. And a lot of these people also do not like to work in a large bureaucracy or etc. So therefore, we always had this rule of for percentage of independent production, and I think it's part of the cornerstone of the success of the industry. And I don't think that that should be changed.
And it's in your
But
Act.
I mean, that's how we set it out.
Right.
Obviously, you know, I'm not here to make any decision at this point in time. We will listen to all the arguments. Yeah.
Right. But I just wonder how you interpret the section of the Act that talks about independent production.
Well, we have, you know full well, we have always said, yes, that's important, and we have set the 75% rate. Why have we done that? Because we believe in it, and it has proven to be successful.
Okay. So I can take it from there that the part of the framework that talks about 75% of independent production is something you'll have to hear pretty good arguments to budge from.
Like we set out our opening positions, how we see it, etc. Obviously, we have to approach these issues with an open mind.
Right.
But that being said, you know, if people come before, I would have thought I'm surprised you pick on the independent production, presumably because of the audience, but I would have thought some other issues are of greater importance.
Yeah, it is primarily because of the audience and some things that have been, some concerns that have been expressed by the audience. So, terms of trade, I guess, I don't know, how many times are you called a hero in your job?
I'm delighted that our pressure, partially at least, has moved this forward. We have now at every hearing, at the Rogers purchase of City, at the Shaw merger or purchase of Global, and now at the Bell purchase CTV, reiterated, folks, this is important. Get it done. And if you don't have it done at the hearing, I want to see your latest best offer, and we will impose something on that basis. I mean, it's all in your incentive to get it done. I don't want to get involved, but let's get this off the table, because it is so vital to ensure that we have the diversity that we want.
So there's a chance for them to negotiate it, or there's a chance for them to have it be part of their decision?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. CBC, 75th anniversary, happy birthday. A new strategic plan that's getting a lot of favorable comment. In the CBC situation, in their license renewal, it'll be the first time in 11 years, 10 or 11 years since they've been before you to have their license renewed. But how do you think you can add value to that process, given their particular situation?
Well, two things. First of all, essentially two hearings, right? Here, the SSC and CBC. Quite different situations, quite different challenges, etc. But more than that, we are living in the age of convergence. We've seen the convergence in the technology. We've seen the convergence in the industry structure, which is now basically 4 big groups in the country. And there is CBC as a sole player, not tied to any distributor content, having a very specific mandate. And we also, our whole system is a challenge because it's based on control of access. You can't broadcast in this country unless you get a license from us. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, given the convergence, giving the delivery of a lot of video or a lot of broadcast material over the top, we don't control that at all. We can't influence it at all. So our primary means of controlling, of determining, and regulating is slowly going. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you want to see Canadian content in the future, you will either get it primarily because of the creativity and ingenuity of Canadians producers. There also has to be a certain element of subsidization, and there has to be some leadership and some opportunities. And where does a national broadcaster fit in that? Lots of other countries spend fortunes on that, with a specific mandate, etc. We were looking at this for the first time in 11 years, and well, basically, as I see it, the principal theme of this, what is the role of the broadcaster in the converged digital age, where you don't have access control? What are you going to do? What should you do, etc. And what can we regulate? By regulate means help you to fulfill that role. And everything that Hubert said this morning at the 5-year plan, who would, on a general level, you could subscribe to it. But I think the key is to focus in exactly on the issue that you are now in a completely different environment. You're on your own. You don't have any support from a distributor. What is your role as a national broadcaster?
Right. So the role as a national broadcaster can be other things than broadcasting.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm delighted to see that he mentioned it this morning, and when he came and made a presentation to the CRTC, that obviously they have budgetary problems in their funds, but they do not think at all of cutting the new media side, as it's called. It's not that new anymore, but if anything, increasing it. They very much realize they have to be on all platforms. And to be relevant, if you're not on all platforms, then how can you exercise any leadership or contribute?
Now, the CBC says that it wants to be more Canadian in terms of its production, and will move towards that. You've lowered Canadian content for the private sector slightly. What do you think about the CBC's Canadian content?
Again, this is something that that's why we have the hearing. Where should it be? As always, it's balancing. On the one hand, you want to see as much content as possible. On the other hand, you don't want to hamstring them by overly burdening them, given, after all, there's limited means that they have, and also the attractiveness of some of the programming. Valuable as it may be, desirable as it may be, some of it is not that attractive, or at least not in the present format. And I come with this very much with an open mind, because I don't think anybody really knows. You can look at other nations and the formula they have. You look at the BBC or Radio France or Radio New Zealand or New Zealand Broadcasting, or the ABC in Australia, but they are all in a different situation. First of all, they don't have two languages, so they don't have that problem. Secondly, they don't live to the biggest powerhouse of entertainment.
But I guess the other thing about the age-old question about the CBC is, should it be a more Canadian CBS, so to speak, or should it be something different from should its Canadianness be its only point of distinction, or should it be something else?
This is the whole set of issues that should they be in any way in competition with the private sector, or should they fill the gaps that the private sector does not into? Should their funding be purely government? Should it be a mixture as it is right now, or should they have a subscription model like a PBS or so, or all three, or different? All of those issues will, in some way or other, come up. I mean, I just see them as here's a chance. The environment has changed drastically. For 11 years, we haven't looked at it. We really treated you with benign neglect. Let's look at it and say, what can we do to make you succeed in this, and what is your role in that new environment?
So it doesn't sound to me that you're looking at a cursory kind of license renewal. It sounds like it's going to be a very thorough examination of the CBC.
I think the license renewal is a minor part. The major part will be to sort of come up with a common understanding. What's your role, and how it should be fulfilled? Right,
but do you intend to do that in the context of the license renewal?
Yeah, well, that's how we work. I mean,
yes, right. Okay.